it's Hailey, and today I'm going to be talking about 16 books that changed my life. So this video is a little bit different because it's not really a recommendations video. This list is very personal to me, and it is just the books that for one reason or another, I think they are books that absolutely changed my life. Like, reading has changed my life for sure in ways that I never could have imagined, and these are kind of the books that contributed to that change. So I'm not really going to be going through synopsises for any of these books. I'm just going to be talking about why they made this list and how they changed my life. So this list is a mix of YA and also of classics, and a lot of them are going to be British classics because I am a Canadian and I went to a Canadian university and I'm an English major, so we read a lot of Canadian lit and we read a lot of British lit and a little bit of American lit. So I have mostly read stuff that is in the hemisphere where I live, but I do want to be venturing out into other hemispheres and reading all sorts of different world classics. I just haven't quite gotten there yet. So this list is going to change at different points in my life. It's going to be a completely different list, but at this point, these are the books that have changed my life. I also think this is really cool because everyone's list is going to be different for this topic. So no two people are going to have the exact same list, which I think is awesome because having that, like, differences in our opinions in this community is what makes it amazing. So I'm just really excited to talk about some books that changed my life. So without further ado, I'm gonna stop talking and get into it. So this list is in no particular order, but I figured I would just start off with the obvious one, and that is Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. If you guys have been following me for a while, or you follow me on Instagram, or you get my channel name, or you follow me on anything at all, or know anything about me, you guys know that I absolutely adore this story. I first read it when I was in my first year of university, and I read actually through the looking glass for a class, but I loved it so much that I had to read this one, and it was my first time reading it, and I absolutely fell in love with it. I just love the fact that the world is so nonsensical, and it's kind of something where, because it's so nonsensical and weird, you can pick it up at any point in your life and you'll get something different from the story, and you can kind of make sense of it on your own. After that first year of university, I made it my goal to take at least one class every year where I studied this book, and I did achieve that goal, and I just thought it was so interesting because it was a different class every time, and each professor took something different from the story, which kind of proves my point where it's a story that you make sense of on your own, and it allows your imagination to run wild, which I love, and I do have 25 copies of it. You can't see them right now because they're on top of my bookshelf, but if you guys follow me on Instagram, you have definitely seen them, or if you watched my Alice collection, which I will link down below for you guys, then you have seen a lot of them, although I have acquired quite a few since then. Next up is The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. I read this book at a point in my life where it really spoke to me. I think if I read it now, I wouldn't enjoy it nearly as much, but when I was in high school and I read this for a grade 11 English class, it was just at a point in my life where I could really relate to the main character and I could understand what he was going through, and it just was a book that really spoke to me at that time, and it was one of the books that I attribute my love of reading to. Next up is 1984 by George Orwell. This, as well as Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. I can't find that book right now, or else I would include it on this list as well, but it's just kind of, just pretend it's here. But these books were the first books that I ever read that were dystopians, and dystopian classics in particular, and they really changed my perspective on the world around me and made me consider, like, government and how it affects me, because it was just, I mean, I was in high school, so it was something that I never really considered, but they really made me think about my place in the larger world, and specifically 1984 I think is really relevant right now with censorship and all that stuff, and it's just a great read. I think I might actually reread it soon because I do think it's really relevant. It's actually had a big resurgence in sales recently since recent events, but Fahrenheit 451 really made me realize the importance of literature and how important it is to keep literature alive, and I think as a reader anyone would appreciate that book and how important it is to keep the arts and keep that imagination alive. Next up is A Little Princess by Frances Hodgson Burnett. I actually read this last year for the first time, but I grew up watching this movie, and it was a story that I loved, and reading the book for the first time kind of just brought me back to my childhood and made me remember why I loved this story so much. It is such a beautiful story. It's all, like, I just love children's literature because it encourages your imagination, and it makes you stay young, which I just love, and I think that the story of Sarah is such a beautiful story, and it's clearly one that has spoken to me in my youth as well as in my adulthood. Next up is one that I actually just thought of, and it wasn't included in the 16 16, but I think it's worth mentioning, and that is the Magic Treehouse series by Mary Pope Osborne. These are the first books that I can ever pinpoint really like loving. And like when I say books, I don't mean like including picture books and stuff from my youth. I mean like books where it was like I was reading it on my own. I just remember wanting to get all of like the entire series, and there's so many of them, and I remember wanting to read them over and over again, and I would just devour them. I loved them so much. Like I remember, I think it was Dolphins at Dusk or something. That was one of my favorites. Midnight on the Titanic. I'm probably getting the times wrong, but those stories are just so close to my heart because they, like, I wasn't a huge reader when I was younger, so having that series that I really loved, that along with The Amazing Days of Abby Hayes, I loved those as well. It's really nice to be able to look back and see some books that I enjoyed when I wasn't a huge reader. And I always love when I work in a bookstore, and I love when kids come in and they're looking for a book and they're around the age of Magic Treehouse. I always recommend it to them, or we'll have kids who come in and they're looking specifically for those books, and I just like fangirl over it. I just love those stories so much. Next up is a book that I'm sure you guys all knew was going to be on here, and that is The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. This is kind of the book that I kind of pinpoint my turning point of becoming a reader on, because this was the book that I first loved. Like I really, really, really loved. It is a story that I've read many times since my first time reading it, and I fall in love with it all over again every time I read it. And I've always been someone who's interested in history, and this combines history and this beautiful writing style. Like I was more of a writer than I was a reader when I was a kid. It has always been my dream to write a New York Times bestselling novel. That is still a dream of mine that I'm keeping alive. Haven't done it yet, but there's still time. I'm only 21, so still time. But this book is really one where the writing just spoke to me, and I was like, I want to write something like that. Like I want to write something that is as beautiful as that. So I just think Liesel's story is amazing, and I've done a full review on it, so if you guys want to see it, I will link it down below for you guys, because I could just gush about this book forever. The next couple of books are kind of funny stories, but it is Etiquette and Espionage by Gail Carriger and Looking for Alaska by John Green. And the reason that I'm including these two books on this list is because they are both the reason that I met two of my best friends. So Etiquette and Espionage, I was in this group project last year in university, and I saw one of the girls in my group had this book, and she's now one of my best friends. Like I was like, oh, she's reading YA, like I had to talk to her. So this book is really one of the reasons why we are best friends, because it got us, like, we realized that we had the same taste in books. Like I hadn't read this book yet, and I've read it now and I did enjoy it. Like it's not incredible, but it was really enjoyable. But it was just awesome to be able to bond over YA with someone, and that's really the reason why we met each other. And this book, I was actually in a reading circle for this one in grade 12, and like the best friend that I'm referring to with this one and we had been friends, but then we read this book together and we did like this whole project on it, and I think it's one of the reasons why we became closer together. We both ended up being English majors. She's changed majors since then, but it really was one of the reasons why I gained a great friend in my life. So honestly, these two books have changed my life because they brought amazing people into it, and that, my friends, is the power of literature. Next up is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone by J.K. Rowling. This is a book that I'm sure this would make a lot of people's lists, and I honestly considered leaving this book off of this list because I didn't read all the Harry Potter books when I was little. I remember my whole entire family reading them as they came out, but I was like, they're doing it, I don't want to do it. Like, classic stupid me. But I did read the first three when I was a kid, and it is like, the reason I'm including it on this list is because one, it is an amazing and incredible story, and two, it's something that I remember doing with my family when we were kids. Like, I didn't read the books, like I said, but I did watch the movies with them, and it was something that I did really enjoy. And also because this is one of the books that introduced me to fantasy. This is like the first really older book that is fantasy that I can remember reading, so I do attribute a lot of my love of fantasy to this book. Next up, I have To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I read this for my grade 10 English class, and it is really the book that exposed me to the issues of racism. It was something that, like, I wasn't completely ignorant to it before, but it was something that I thought was in the past. It wasn't something that I thought could possibly be happening in, like, what year was it when I was in grade 10? I don't even know, a long time ago, but it wasn't something that I thought could be happening then. But because of this book, it spurred on discussions about racism in America today. And I mean, as a Canadian, it's not something that I see a lot like at home. So it was just such a heartbreaking and powerful story. And more recently, I read The Hate U Give by Angie, and this is one that really exposed me more so to the issues of racism in a modern day setting. Now that I'm definitely not ignorant to that, I try and do my research on all of the things that are happening in the world, as heartbreaking as it may be. I like to stay informed, but just reading about it from the perspective of someone who's in it was so heartbreaking, and addressing issues of police brutality and white privilege. It just it makes you realize how privileged I am to be a white person, and I really wish I didn't have that privilege. I wish that everyone was just on equal playing field. And honestly, these two books, I think, are part of the reason why literature is so important and so powerful, because it can give you the perspective of someone that you wouldn't normally get. And I think that's a very important thing. Next up is The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. This, honestly, this book, if you had asked me back in the day when it first came out, if there was anything wrong with it, I would have said absolutely not. It is the most perfect book in the whole world. Now I've read it many times since then, and I do recognize that it's not a perfect book, but it's still one that I really love. And once again, it's one of the books that made me become a reader. So it's very, very important to me. And it also was a bonding point for a lot of relationships in my life. So it is a very important book for me. Next up is The Little Prince by, I can never say his name, Antoine de Saint-Exupery? I don't know. I should be able to speak French because I'm Canadian, but I can't. Anyways, this book I read this past year, and I had been recommended it countless times, and I had wanted to pick it up, I just never had, but I'm so glad that I picked it up, and I think it's a book that I'm going to keep on picking up throughout my life, because it's a book that, once again, I feel like you can get something from it different every time you read it. No matter how old you are, you will gain something from it. And I feel like it's a book just about living in the moment and kind of learning to appreciate what you have and the little things in life, and kind of just stopping and taking a look. And I feel like, especially nowadays, it's really easy to get caught up in the day-to-day life, wanting to get everything done. I myself, I take on a lot of stuff. I put up at least 3 videos every week. I go to school, I work, I do a lot of stuff. So sometimes it's hard to just take a moment for myself and relax and kind of appreciate everything that's around me. And I think this book is very important because it kind of just reminds you to do so. Next up is a book that, as a Canadian, I couldn't possibly leave off of this list, and that is Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. I grew up watching the TV show, or no, it was movies, but it seemed like a TV show when I was a kid. I think it's because I get it mixed up with Road to Avonlea, but I grew up watching this with my mom. I totally remember having Delissio pizza after my sisters were done dance, and we would be watching this show. I totally remember it, and I wasn't a huge fan of it as a kid because I thought it was boring, but I read this book for my Canadian literature class in my second year of university, and I fell in love with it. And since then, I've rewatched the movie and once again fell in love with it. I feel like as a kid, because Anne, it's really her imagination. You're seeing her view of the world, but as a kid, you have your own imagination that's really active and you just want to go, 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 go. But now that I'm older, I feel like I can appreciate the story more because it really brings me back to my childhood, just not even just with the nostalgia that it brings about in me, but also because Anne has this incredible imagination that just awakes my own imagination again, because it's fallen asleep a little bit since I was a kid. So it's always nice to read this book, and especially because it's a Canadian story and Canadian pride. Next up is Mouse by Art Spiegelman. These graphic novels I read, I don't even remember when I first read them, but I've read them a couple of times since my first time reading them, and every single time they have me I can't even describe how I feel after reading them because they are so powerful and amazing. They, I think, are so inventive, and they're told what happens in them. It takes place during the time of World War II, and the son is talking to his father, who was a Jew in Germany, I believe, or possibly Poland. I can't quite remember right now, but he was it was at the time of World War II. So the Nazis in this book are cats and the Jewish people are mice. It's just such an interesting way to tell the story, and it's heartbreaking but so beautiful and so impactful. Actually, these books, along with The Diary of Anne Frank, I was at first really uncomfortable with reading The Diary of Anne Frank because I was like, it's her diary, what if she doesn't want people to read it? But at the same time, I think it's such an impactful story, and you see her mind in the terrible situation that she's in, and like, I really enjoy reading things about World War II because I think it opens your eyes to what can happen if you allow such terrible hatred to saturate society, and it really shows you how important love is. I'm actually really looking forward to, when I go to Amsterdam this summer, going to the Anne Frank house. I think it's going to be amazing, like really difficult, but absolutely amazing. And the final books on this list are the various plays and works of William Shakespeare. I haven't read all of them, but I've read quite a few, and I think Shakespeare just kind of opened my eyes to how beautiful language can be, and he also showed me a different mode of language, like through his sonnets and even through his plays. Like, plays aren't something that I normally like to read, but Shakespeare is something I never get tired of. I just love his stories, and I think the way that he uses language is beautiful, and it really makes sense why they have truly withstood the test of time. So those are all 16-ish, because I threw a couple in there unexpectedly, books that have changed my life. Honestly, reading as a whole has changed my life incredibly. Like, not only has it made me more empathetic and more aware of everything that's going on around me and really encouraged my imagination, but it has also led me to have this channel, and it has led me to all of you guys and having almost 100,000 subscribers, which is ridiculous. So it has really opened so many doors for me. And working in a bookstore, I now realize the power of literature to change lives for everyone. Like, it is such an amazing thing, and it's so, so, so important to keep it alive and to keep on reading and to just keep on loving books, because books are amazing and they do so much for the world. Like, you wouldn't even realize until they are gone how much books do for us. So it's very, very important to keep on reading, and I hope that you guys will, and I know that I will. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what books have changed your lives, if any of the books on my list match with yours, or even if we have no books in common. I would love to hear about what books have really changed your lives. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!